But I know even some of my experiences. So one of the things I did in church is I was an altar worker. So I had this thing with the prophetic call on my life. When I wasn't involved, I was still involved because God was showing me stuff. And then when God wasn't showing me stuff, I was not a worker anyway, so I've seen it in front of my face. So like there was no getting away on a Sundays. And one of the things that really struck me is how little even most of the ministers understood about deliverance. So I'd see people walking with demons, I'd see them come up, I'd see them prayed for, I'd see them leave with the demons. So often that the demons became like frequent flyers. They're just there, just like, another week, they're still there, same demons, still there. And that really troubled me as a young man, because I was like, I don't understand what we're doing. For all these instruments we got playing and all this noise we're making, like demons are coming in and demons are leaving, and they're coming back next week and then they're leaving next week. Like they're church members. Like, I don't understand. And the other thing I experienced, and some of you might relate to this, is what I call the Pentecostal back rub. Now, I think back in the day, we actually had people who knew how to do this stuff. And so what they would do sometimes is they would deliver people quite discreetly, especially the church mothers, and they'd be rubbing the back, and they'd be speaking words of command and casting out spirits. But then what happened is they left off the scene and nobody really knew what they're doing. So what people just started to do, they just started to rub people's backs and demons would manifest. I don't know. Am I the only one? Am I the only one that remembers the Pentecostal back rub? That people just stand there rubbing people's backs as if we were sort of giving Swedish massage to the demons. I don't even understand what we were doing. Just trying to quieten people down in the church. And so I also saw a lot of people manifesting demons who would then just get back rubs. And eventually they'd be a bit quieter, and then we'd move on like something's happened. And it was just like, and then we'd move on to go and like preach something where we talk about the power of God after just sort of sedating demons in the church. So it really affected me. It really, really, I think God's kind of used some of that as sort of fuel for the fire, really. So I don't know what experiences. Let's talk about, I'm going to get into some questions, but let's talk about some of the experiences that people might have had and how that shaped your experience, or even shaped your theology. So I think for me, one of the first experiences I remember proper, I had an interest in childhood. Demons and spirits were just normal. So I have to go to the first, all sorts of things manifested in and around me and in family circles and stuff. So it was just normal. But I think the first proper experience I had as a Christian, owning it for myself, was seeing someone being prayed for. And well, they weren't being prayed for, first of all. I think we were all just in worship or something. But then they sat on the floor and they took the yoga position, the cross leg, yeah. And then we're sort of like, okay, this doesn't look like Jesus. And then as they started to pray, they started hissing.
Wow.
Which was a bit of a surprise, because I knew the person. And then the person who was leading it at the time started to take them through deliverance. So we were kind of in the background backing them up. And it was really odd to see this person starting to writhe around on the floor like a snake, especially when you know people. It's just like, okay, I understand what that was now, and I understand the spirit that was now. But I think that was my first experience of being right up close in my face, seeing it happening, standing in the authority of God, seeing somebody delivered. And I think the only shocking thing to me was that I'd known the person for quite some time. And this was the first time I'd seen anything like this. So it's kind of like, oh, okay. How long's that been around? We talk weekly. And so that was my first experience. But I remember at the time, but it felt right. It's like it sat in my spirit. It's like, yeah, this makes sense. This is what's supposed to happen. We're supposed to be bringing freedom to people. And I think because there was someone older in Christ there, it felt quite normal because of the circles I was moving in. But it was very separate from my Sunday church experience. And I think that even formed a thing, because very quickly, certain things became quite separated from my general church experience, and then what we would do outside of that separately, which was quite interesting. Guys, give us some of yours.
I'm gonna come in because I'm African, so deliverance is quite interesting. I think for me, even as you're talking, we had similar experiences, and for me, it was going to church as a child, and that's where a lot of fear came out around deliverance, because you're a child, and I think, and it's something that I do think about, because we exposed without no explanation. So a lot of people don't say what's going on. So all you see as a child is seeing Mrs. So and so, who's 5 feet, cute, petite, dainty, auntie, who all of a sudden starts speaking with a chucky voice and hissing and legit slithering across the floor. It scared me as a child, so I never wanted to do deliverance. And because, like most children in the 80s, I'd stayed up to watch The Exorcist.
Yes.
So it was like, oh my gosh. And I think as Africans, you said right at the beginning, Darren, that demons exist, as in there is a spiritual world. Ephesians 6 talks to us about that. But it became negative, and I think for me, it became fearful. And also, it was then, in those situations, the person doing deliverance is there with a microphone exposing everything the individual has done. Why? And for me, a lot of the recurring themes about, oh, it's this person. So it's either your neighbor, your mother-in-law thing. Like, I feel sorry for mother-in-laws.
Your auntie?
Your auntie, your relative, your brother. So it's always family. So I think for me, it then became this thing of, oh my gosh, you can't trust your family. Demons are powerful.
Yeah.
You need to keep away from them. If you become demon, if you someone's, so for me, by the time I became a teenager, they were like, "Oh, come out for deliverance." Yo, people point out you need deliverance. I'm like, no, I'm fine. There's nothing wrong with me. But then you get forced out to come and do this, and there's the oil being thrown on you, and there's the pushing on your face. So it just became this really traumatic experience. So I avoided it. I wasn't interested. And I think for me, I was watching a YouTube video once, we're talking about this, and the presenter talks about pet demons. And I think for me, a lot of people don't want. I've got issues with deliverance because it's scary, it's loud, it brings a lot of shame. So I think for me, it was, I don't want deliverance because you're going to expose my business in front of the whole church. So I'm okay. And I think for me, I became quite resistant to talking about demons, to hearing about things. I'm like, no, it's just me and my God. I mean, once I confess, everything is okay. So I totally hear you about being able to see stuff happening in an atmosphere in church. And then there's loads of prayer, and there's loads of noise, and there's loads of manifestations and people, and loads of deep voices and answering back. And there's this thing, there was always this thing about having conversations with people.
Oh boy.
So you're there, and then so you're and dragging out the whole thing. So this thing, I'm for me, I'm talking like deliverance sessions 4 5 hours, 6 hours. You're being exposed to this, and again, as a child, and it built up so much fear. And even for me, when you're going out, going for example, going back out, going into the world and be like, no, I'm going to do this, I'm going to dabble into this. I knew something was wrong with me, like when I started taking Jesus seriously. But I was like, no, I'm okay. I don't want to do deliverance. There's nothing wrong with me. I don't want to be exposed. So it was all those things, and I think that's why this is such a tough thing for a lot of Christians. Because we don't want to accept the fact that there's a spiritual realm, and that there's a war, and there's things that happens in the unseen, or we've grown up in it, and it just gives you the heebie-jeebies. I don't want to touch it. I'm okay. Don't expose me. And then it becomes this thing, but it's just full of shame, because it's like, what have I done? oh, I must have done something. And then it gets you to start doubting your salvation. Am I really saved? Okay, let me give my life again.